Well, it looks like one of my Dr. V64 units survived the tornado. Needs a little cleanup, but I think this is the one where the third of 4 DRAM banks is throwing errors, but it should still work perfectly as a 128 meg unit, and actually a little bit better since the boot crack should still work. All right, so I'll demonstrate some basic usage with this CD that I actually burned for my Junior. But make sure I hit play here, turn the TV on, and I have Mario 64 plugged in the top, which is a CIC NUS 6102 game. And Blast Core, which I'm loading here, is also a 6102 game. That's the lockout chip that this game requires to boot. And so I have one plugged into the top of the N64 in order to boot the game in the bottom, but Mario 64 takes priority. So what we have to do is block the ROM and allow access to the boot chip, this CIC 6102. And Bust a Move 2 is also a 6102 game. And it boots. But there's something else missing. Bust a Move does not have built-in EEPROM save memory for saving your game. It requires a controller pack if it saves at all, I don't remember. And looks like Blast Core requires it. You get a black screen. Most games will work, they just don't save, but Blast Core is one of the ones that doesn't work. So I have another emulation adapter here with Mario Kart 64 Japanese, and it is an EEPROM title. And so now it should get to the file selection screen, or create a file and let you start the game. Only problem is that it's, of course, going to save over Mario Kart, or rather, it will erase the save progress in order to save its own. But there is another device that people use in tandem with the V64 to solve that problem without having to, manually back up and restore saves from every cartridge. This is the DX256. It has 256 different banks of 4K EEPROM. You can select with the dials on the front. So that's 256 slots for saving 4K EEPROM games, and there aren't even that many titles that use 4K EEPROM. And as you can see, it has my save memory on this bank. I'm going to switch banks. Oh yeah, by the way, that GoldenEye has defective EEPROM anyway. I actually traded someone a working one for that one, since, I didn't need a working save chip. And as you can see, it's acting like this is the first time the game's ever been turned on, asking me to enter a name, because there is no Blast Core save data on this bank. Just to show you that it retained it. I guess I gotta wait through all this. Won't let me press start until now. And yeah, see, it didn't ask me for a name this time. I'll switch back to my other slot. And we'll see if I get my progress back. And there we go, you can see all the levels cleared again. Okay, so all early titles were CIC NUS 6102. All third-party titles were 6102. And late first-party titles were 6102. So 6102 is by far and away the most common security chip for booting your backup games. But Smash Brothers here is going to be CIC NUS 6103. And Bust a Move is a 6102 cartridge because it's a third-party game. So how do you boot it? You can see it doesn't work. So menu, boot crack. You have this on later backup-enabled BIOSes. Turn it on, and bam, it boots. But there's another problem here. I picked this one on purpose because this is an SRAM title that uses battery-backed SRAM for its save games. And so I just changed to mono and moved the screen position, and I'll show you that it did not store those settings. Bust a Move 2 has no battery-backed SRAM or 4K EEPROM or 16K EEPROM or flash RAM. Those are all different save types that N64 games can use. And so this is the device we use for dealing with SRAM titles, the DS1. And you don't need to leave the emulation adapter in there. I just only have one hand. The DS1 does work as an emulation adapter. So let's see if it retains my settings this time. And yep, mono and shifted screen. You can use the DS1 Manager ROM to switch between 6 different save banks, but I have an alternative here that doesn't use anything. It's just a cartridge with the ROM removed, an SRAM cartridge. And that is not Revenge, that is Smash. And just to show that it can save, switch to mono, shift the screen. And my settings are still there. Yep, it retained it. And the reason why you can't do this through an emulation adapter is because it blocks the ROM, and SRAM is addressed through the same bus as the ROM. I'm trying to get back to the CD, but I keep pressing the wrong button. I keep pressing play when I have a menu option selected. All right, there we go. I wanted to show you what segment alternation does when you load another ROM without disabling it. And it's supposed to be something that takes up the boot portion of the ROM, shifts it to the 4th bank of memory in order to boot the boot crack instead. And but you can see that it did not load Star Fox. It still says Smash Brothers at the bottom, and it doesn't work. So I will turn segment alteration off by pressing this key. And now it should let me load Star Fox. Which is a 6101 title. It is the only 6101 title. And so the only other game you could use to boot it is Star Fox 64 itself or the Japanese version. And, it would have worked with Revenge, but wouldn't have had save. So we'll use Mario Kart with save, EEPROM. Load the boot crack. And we're in. God, that didn't sound right at all. Terrible. It's the 3D spatializer thing. I guess that sounds worse, but we got to bypass it. And now it should sound normal. Let's compare. Yeah, that's much better, except that this is a mono TV. But yeah, that 3D spatializer audio thing that makes everything sound terrible. It's just one of those things they added into it to make it seem like it has some legitimate consumer use, just like VCD. Of course, it has a legitimate use as a development machine, but in order to justify selling it to end users, they had to throw in all this superfluous stuff that doesn't really have anything to do with Nintendo 64, and you pretty much always want to bypass it. Of course, this system has Ultra HDMI, so it makes sense to bypass everything, audio and video, and have the V64 connected to one input or display, and have the N64 connected to another, so no video is running through the unit. If your V64 ever needs a replacement power supply, just look for a CD-ROM enclosure that has a 4-pin power supply. It's 5 volts and 12 volts, and splice on a 4-pin mini DIN from like an S-Video cable or something. Breaking out my hackish 6102 SRAM boot cartridge again to demonstrate some stuff I didn't mention before. In this case, I'm going to show what to do as an alternative to the boot crack, which the boot crack does not support 6106 Yoshi boot, which is used in Yoshi's Story, F-Zero X, and Cruising the World. And since F-Zero X is an SRAM game, I figured I'd use that one to demonstrate. So let's see. First, I'll show that, of course, it doesn't boot with a mismatched boot type. So 6106 ROM trying to boot on a 6102 cartridge, of course, black screen. The boot crack doesn't support it, probably because there are only 3 games that use it. Black screen. Then again, it supports 6101, which only 1 game uses, Star Fox 64. So I turned segment alternation off to disable the boot crack, and now this is essentially a 6106 SRAM boot cart, with 6106 from the Japanese Yoshi's Story and SRAM from the DS1, And as you can see, it works. F-Zero booted directly without a crack. And since I haven't demonstrated boot cracking a 6105 Zelda boot ROM, let's go ahead and load Zelda, which is also an SRAM title. Majora's Mask was Flash RAM, but here goes 6102 SRAM, since we're about to boot crack 6105 Zelda boot to run on 6102 Mario boot. Oh yeah, and I think this was a brand new copy of Yoshi's Story that had never been used. Anyway, this is also the largest ROM supported, 256 megs, 32 megabytes. And this is the original drive model, even if it's a replacement. Stepped on the tray to the original a long time ago. And yeah, of course, it doesn't work right now, mismatched boot type, so then we boot crack it. And now, 6105 running on 6102. And I actually have DRAM errors on this unit, so I'm kind of surprised this works this well, but I played a ton of, like, I think Pokemon Puzzle League and a couple others that were 256 megabits. They worked fine. And yeah, I wanted to show that Revenge still worked, but I mixed up the ROM with NBA in the Zone 99 at some point. But I have the right one right over here inside of a Star Soldier board, which was damaged, so I did a board swap with NBA in the Zone 99 to help out a local retailer. Oh yeah, and you could see where the little serial EEPROM would go if Star Soldier used it. So a lot of games that don't have EEPROM still use EEPROM-capable boards. And since I cut away some of the shielding, I had to cut slots in the bottom of the cartridge to avoid snagging on some of the ground contacts from the cartridge slot in the console. So be careful if you have to do one. And yeah, that looks like WCW NWO Revenge. Works. I'll have to do another video on these, and I might as well show you the most common CIC NUS 6102 lockout chip. So yeah, it's just a standard 6102 Mario boot type, and the only other ones of consequence are 6103 Diddy boot, 6105 Zelda boot, and 6106 Yoshi boot. But if you're using boot cracks and boot emulators, you really just need a 6102 boot cartridge with the right save type in most cases. I got the DX256 switched over to pass-through mode, so you can see here that I just saved a third star. Switch to mono, and I'll demonstrate that it retains that save. We are 3 stars, mono. I'm going to change to another bank where I have 2 stars, and there we are, 2 stars. Switch banks. This one I should have 1 star. There it is, 1 star. And I'll show that the save is still intact, the original save on the cartridge itself. And there we have 119, 120. Since mine was configured as an emulation adapter by default that blocks the ROM chip from booting, I had to short that jumper that says open for EMU and turn my resistor 90 degrees instead of, you could just remove it, but I wanted this to be reversible. And so it's disconnected. Pikachu consoles are a no-go with the V64 since there's no EXT port, but that's why I have this to show you in the near future. It's a V64 Junior 512. Maybe I should go ahead and demonstrate the Bung Dr. V64 Junior 512 with the Bung Multi Xchanger. They're both part of the Multi Game Doctor Series 3, along with the GB Xchanger, so they're all interoperable, but I'm about to be putting XStation into this PlayStation and won't be able to show it loading CDs after that. But yeah, you can see I'm connected by this parallel cable from the parallel port of the PlayStation and the Multi Xchanger right to the back of the V64 Junior, where I have Smash Brothers loaded unpatched. I've got it powered off of a 9-volt center negative power supply, and this isn't going to work because there's no crack. I didn't patch the ROM, I didn't run a boot emulator, and I have a mismatched boot type. And I'm running the Japanese Mario Kart, which is 6102 EEPROM, and Smash needs 6103 SRAM, and I have that here with Griffey. And of course I can approximate that with any 6103 Diddy boot game using the DS1 to add SRAM to it, but this has both. And I don't need an emulation adapter because the V64 Junior, or E64, works as an emulation adapter. Let's show that it's going to use the SRAM in the cartridge, even though I haven't modified it. Set it to mono, and I shifted the screen, and let's see if it retained that. Yes, it did. It's clear settings. You'll watch the screen jump. Oop. And just to show that Griffey is not modified, I'll boot it without. And by the way, you can run this off of 6 AA batteries. And it works.
Hi, this is Ken Griffey Jr.
Now let's load a game so you can see how it works, since, you know, I already had Smash loaded before. I'll pick a particularly small one. Dr. Mario is only 4 megabytes. Because yes, this is much slower than loading from a PC, but yeah, it's still fast enough to where cutting the PC out may be worth it for people who have a PlayStation in their living room. Of course, the batteries let you run back and forth if your PC is in another room or something, but developers using this as intended should have a PC next to it in their workspace area, so they wouldn't be using the batteries. And yeah, I'm going to use Mario Kart here, 6102, to boot Dr. Mario, which is also an EEPROM save title. And it works. I'm actually surprised I didn't get the message about initializing the save like you usually get. I must have ran Dr. Mario on Mario Kart last. But let's try loading something bigger. And I neglected to put a boot emulator on that CD, and so I can't use this SRAM cartridge, the 6102 from Revenge. I'm going to have to use a 6106 to boot it. And since there are no other 6106 games with SRAM, I'm going to have to use the DS1 again to turn Yoshi, the 6106 game, into a 6106 with SRAM game. I should have done this while the game was loading, save some time. Oops. But yeah, this is a much larger game. It's going to take a lot longer to write. If it was on a PC with EPP or ECP, parallel port transfer speeds, it would go a whole lot faster. The jr512 supports like the fastest of the standard ECP or EPP modes, where the original V64 only supports standard, and the earlier V64 Junior, the non-512, supports that. Whichever one was in between. I can't remember right now which one's the fastest. I want to give you a real-time experience of what it takes to load off of a PlayStation. It is not convenient. It is slow. It's just, you know, in some cases it's more convenient than running to your PC and running back. We're only halfway there. But of course, to put it in context, we're loading an entire game that's twice the size of Super Mario 64. We're not just loading a level or a character or a menu here. And the entire game, 128 megabits. And yeah, back in the day, we were big enough geeks that we actually had some old DOS PC next to our V64 in the living room. Before home theater PCs were a thing, this was the 90s. And we're almost there. Tempted to speed this up, but I don't want to misrepresent how long it takes. Done. And it works. And since this is a mono TV with a stereo cable, I am in the habit of changing that first. I should just get a Y-splitter, but I don't know where anything is after the tornado. And that includes my second E64 or V64 Junior 512. Actually, that was missing a long time before. But yeah, you could tell I used to have two packages here, 2 sets of instructions. And which, yeah, by the way, all the tools they tell you to use in here are going to be grossly outdated because people made, you know, non-command line tools mostly. You know, Yukon 64 is the most up-to-date, supports every copier out there, transfer utility to use with this. And even that one is actually for command line. So for command line, I prefer the Obsidian suite, which is Junior specific, with tools like Maset and Motet and Elam and Evac for backing up saves and changing boot types and transferring with XP. Well, I guess I'll demonstrate again, this time with a Pikachu console. which doesn't fit on the other V64. And also I got picture-in-picture working on here with PS1Digital going to HDMI and the N64 going to S-Video. This monitor does not like 240p over composite. And let's load something small real quick just to show that it works. And 6103 is wrong for this game. I need 6102 with EEPROM. GoldenEye does that, even though this one has a bad EEPROM chip. Constantly loses saves. There we go. Well, I thought XStation was incompatible since it just shows a couple files instead of booting up into the XStation menu as if it were a game, like I thought it might. And but it looks like you can just hold start and press select to boot it up. And I seem to remember only having to press start to start an actual game disc that was inserted, but this works. And takes me to the menu where you can see my disc image that I made off of that same disc that I've been testing with. And of course it's not an actual PlayStation game, so it doesn't boot a PlayStation game, but it does mount it. So after you hit reset, it still has that disk image mounted, and now the Multi Xchanger can see it and list out the ROMs that are on there. So let's load something small. And I never showed the battery area. It takes 6 AA's. But I hesitate to use them because it seems like every time I do, they leak within a few days, and I always regret it. So I avoid using batteries whenever possible. I still don't have my 6105 Zelda boot cartridges handy, but it looks like Banjo Tooie here was patched for EverDrive. Well, I mean, the Cracktro mentions that Marshall H requested that lack finish a crack he started many years ago, and so I guess it was really for the 64 drive. But yeah, I figure I'll also demonstrate that even though it fits the Pikachu console, the V64 Junior does not fit the Warrior 64. Since it doesn't have that same contour on the top that it needs to nestle into. And of course it does have this EXT port on the bottom, but that doesn't really help with the original V64. And well, first of all, the V64's slot on the top is actually meant to fit a cartridge in it for dumping the cartridge into the V64's DRAM. It doesn't fit directly onto the bottom of the N64 without some little adapter piece that it comes with. And that adapter piece itself just, well, let me show you. It doesn't have to be in there to show you. It just doesn't even fit into the hole on the bottom of the Warrior 64, so there's not even any point in trying. And of course, the legs don't, or the feet don't really fit or nestle in where they're supposed to. So yeah, nothing about the Warrior 64 works. It doesn't work with the standard V64. It doesn't work with the V64 Junior. I don't even know why they gave it that EXT port, because I'm pretty sure it's not going to fit a 64DD either. And that same contour prevents you from fitting anything like this or the Hyperkin import adapter. So I can't just use one of those to elevate the V64 Junior. It just doesn't work. And the Banjo Tooie crack, it not only patches 6105 Zelda boot to 6102 Mario boot, it also changes the 16K EEPROM save type to SRAM. And you can save to either a DS1 or an original SRAM boot cartridge like WCW and WO Revenge. But my understanding is that you can only save 1 file to an original cartridge, 2 files to a DS1, 3 or more to the original cartridge. And the reason why it patches it to SRAM is because it's more manageable. Like there are more utilities for backing up and restoring SRAM saves, where, you know, V64 Junior, you could just use eVec3 from Obsidian to back up and restore 16K EEPROM. It doesn't need that, but a regular V64, CD64, Z64, others, like they might need SRAM patches instead. And I thought the patched ROM didn't work at first because I had the jumper pack in there, and apparently the patch requires the expansion pack. It didn't say that anywhere. It wasn't in the Cracktro scroller or anything like that, but I tried it back and forth. Definitely works with the expansion pack and not with the jumper pack. And it's the same case on the EverDrive, which, yeah, that's where I got this. It was part of the EverDrive set from way back when. So I guess the EverDrive needed it to be patched to work before they had worked out all the CICs and save types. And I guess that's one reason to like pure ROMs. And the V64 Junior can boot the pure untouched ROM if you have the right boot and save combination. And but not all units, not all backup units for the N64 can. Looks like we're almost done here. And there's our Cracktro. And I remember Lack, the author of this patch, from N64 Dev and Dexterous forums and even Nintendo Age, but it looks like Marshall H asked him to go back and finish this patch since it wasn't released back in the day. And so now we finally have a patch for Banjo-Tooie. I remember a little bit of drama about clean ROMs back in the day, where sometimes release groups would put a little intro before a ROM just to toot their own horn about how they brought it to you first. And because they brought it to you first, it was usually the only version of the ROM that would circulate online for a while, you know. And some people just wanted the same experience as if they bought the game from the store, and they probably should have just bought the game from the store if they wanted that. But, you know, I guess I understand. They would, like, a utility was made in order to remove certain known intros from ROMs and make them behave normally. And I think it was called Intro Remover or Intro Liberator. And Titanic, I think it was with Crazy Nation, he did not like that. He looked at the way it worked, and he made his Turok 2 intro exploit the way the program was looking for a certain sequence or into file or something. So it would just keep reading more and more into memory and overwrite itself with a buffer overrun exploit, and would cause the PC that's running the utility to strip the N64 ROM of an intro to get a virus. And so, yeah, it was an N64 ROM that could infect your PC with a virus. All right, so let's load something else here. I canceled Conquer because that would have taken, you know, twice as long as Banjo-Tooie, and from a PlayStation, that's just too slow. But from a proper PC with the right parallel port mode, it would go a lot faster. It'd be much more tolerable. But anyway, yeah, Smash Brothers here. Of course, this is a clean ROM. This one is not patched, and so I'm going to need a matched boot and save type. And this is a 6103 SRAM game. Of course, I could use any 6103 game, like, actually 1080 is 6103 SRAM, but I'm going to use Ken Griffey Jr.'s Major League Baseball, or Presents Major League Baseball. And because it has both 6103 and SRAM. Of course, a DS1, I could slap that onto like Diddy Kong Racing or any other 6103 one. I think, yeah, Banjo-Kazooie 6103. There's a lot. Yeah, I'd even say 6103 was kind of Rareware's favorite one that they used the most. I mean, their earliest ones were 6102, since like Blast Core and Killer Instinct Gold and all were before there even were any games with alternate boot types. And in the end, with like Donkey Kong 64, Jet Force Gemini, and Conquer, and all those, they switched to 6105. But everything from Diddy Kong Racing up to that was 6103. Diddy boot. And it remembers Smash's settings, since I guess I haven't booted anything else with this cartridge, or even this cartridge itself. because anything else, or putting the cartridge directly, would have overwritten this save. So just to throw more edge cases at it, here's F-Zero-X, which is a 6106 Yoshi boot game, but it's also SRAM, where Yoshi is not SRAM. So I've added the DS1 here to the Japanese version of Yoshi's Story. That should boot F-Zero-X, but yeah, this is going to take a bit to load. And yeah, there are only like about 3 games that use Yoshi Boot, including Yoshi's Story, F-Zero-X, and Cruising the World. But there are cracks for some of those, and there have to be a different crack for each region. I think they didn't cover every region, but there are cracks and there are boot emulators. And I neglected to put one on this disc, but the way a boot emulator works is you pick it like a ROM, then you turn on the N64 after you've loaded it into your backup device, and it starts executing, waiting for you to load a ROM on top of it. And I guess when you do, maybe it's looking at the header and it could see the entry point for like launching the game program, the executable, since each boot type can have a different entry point. And so it knows which boot type to replicate, and I think it kind of is a software emulator for that boot type. But there are a few games that can check during runtime and tell that you used a boot emulator. And like Banjo-Tooie was one of those. That's the reason why it still needed to crack so many years later. Like, I can't remember when that one was released, like 2009 or something, like long after the N64 was gone, But it took a while for people to completely deconstruct the ROM and find everywhere where it might do that check. And I think like speedrunners had helped Lack. I can't remember which ones helped him by playing through the game and finding every place where those routines were used. But yeah, it finally got fully cracked, and now we have that, as well as always had the ability to boot clean ROMs on this thing, but not all backup units could. Like a CD64, I think you needed extra hardware. The protected cartridge decoder would let you mix and match boot and save types. Wish I had one of those, because it worked with more than just the CD64, and you could get away with having a smaller array of boot and save types if you had that thing. Yeah, so as an original owner of a Dr. V64 and a V64 Junior and a GB Exchanger with Dr. GB card back in the day, I was along for the ride with a lot of this, Yeah, a lot of times there were situations where some new game would come out and nobody knew how to play it for a while. You had to wait until people knew stuff about this new boot chip or this new save type, like when 16K EEPROM came out, or Flash RAM, and confused everybody for a little while. And in the end, we were left hanging with certain games never getting patches or cracks, which was why I was glad to have the V64 Junior. It did not need, some games were just plain old too big to run on my original V64, like, Resident Evil 2 and Conker's Bad Fur Day and stuff like that. But I kept buying, I bought all those games anyway. I don't even know. I guess I just had these things for the fun of it, and because I still had a huge N64 collection, even though I was just some poor kid mowing lawns and collecting cans to buy his games. But yeah, like, that was part of the thrill of it. Like, yeah, I knew nobody else had this stuff or even knew what it was, and to me, that was cool. And a lot of my games I got to keep sealed because, yeah, I could play them without opening the game. So eventually I'd sell those as sealed games. Like, even I had some extra copies of Conker that I bought for like $7.50 on clearance. I think my original copy I bought for $10, the one that I opened and played. But yeah, I never had to open my Mickey Speedway USA, even though I think I got nearly nothing for that in 2017. And one of my Pokemon Puzzle Leagues kept that sealed for a long time. And but yeah, I'm loading another 6106 Yoshi boot title here, Cruising the World, just to demonstrate. And the DS1 in there, it's still like a mismatched save type, but not every game seems to care about that, including Cruising the World, so I'll just leave it in there to demonstrate. Like, sometimes only the boot type matters, but, in general, matched boot and save type, your game is going to work perfectly, And mismatched save type, sometimes it'll work and just won't be able to save. Usually won't even complain about it, like no error message or anything. There we go, cruising the world.